Hello everybody, this is Fun Police, and for today I'm going to be hopefully answering the question of whether or not the American Civil War DLC is worth it in Fire and Maneuver. For those that don't know, by the time this video goes up, a sale will be live that puts it on a discount down from $15 to $10. I'm going to simply go over everything that this DLC contains, and then we'll give my own thoughts on it, and hopefully you will be able to make a better informed decision. So starting off, the American DLC contains 2 new factions for multiplayer. It contains the United States of America, a faction that is a well-rounded roster, but made up of units that overall are low on cohesion. Its units generally sit at only 3 cohesion. And then you also have the Confederate States of America, which is a faction that has efficiency on practically all of its units, and also has a variety of generally powerful traits on those units also. They're well-rounded, but they have a generally high cost, meaning that they will have to play aggressively in order to hold their own. We will dive a bit more into those nations in a minute, but there's some other things that this comes with. The first ones being a new set of campaigns. In fact, you get a total of 2 new campaigns to mess around with. You get the Peninsula Campaign of 1862, and you also get the Overland Campaign, which happens in 1864. You're able to play as both the Americans and the Confederates on both sides. It is both single player and multiplayer, although the multiplayer is a bit buggy right now, but once that's up, that will be an actual option. If you are interested in the single-player content and enjoyed the Crimean War, which is free with the game, the Civil War essentially gives you triple the amount of content by adding a total of 2 new campaigns onto your singular one. On top of that, we also get a bonus music pack, which has a variety of new music tracks for those that are interested. Then diving more into specific factions, we will take a look at the US first of all. The US faction contains, as I said, a lot of low cohesion units. Its standard units sit at only 3 cohesion, compared to the standard 4 of most European powers. This makes them overall cheap, allowing the US to often field large, expansive armies. However, they also do have a focus on melee. Things like the Zouaves and the Irish Brigade contain powerful melee perks that makes the US a faction that has to balance its low cohesion with very aggressive melee plays. It also has access to powerful range drill options through things like the Sharpshooters and Iron Brigade. The US also has a powerful roster of cavalry, generally being well-equipped with useful traits. They are, on overall, very well-rounded and capable in tackling most options, with something like Custer's Brigade being a standout unit, being not only very well-statted for a light cavalry, but also having shock and skirmishing, with only the downside of the breakable trait. It's a very powerful unit, and although expensive, can absolutely destroy units. As an example, I've had a Custer's Brigade that gets around behind an enemy artillery piece, shoots it once with its carbines, and then charges it, and completely wipes it out in a single move. And this plays very well into the aggressive nature of the US. Their artillery is not the best out there, but it is serviceable. It has mostly standard options, with the 3-inch ordnance rifle being one of its more standout units thanks to a range drill perk, and then it also has a Gatling gun for late period. One of the biggest weaknesses of the US is that its rifled breech loaders are only available on US sharpshooters. None of its other infantry get access to them, meaning that if you want to make use of breech loaders, then you will have to sacrifice range to get them. This is a bit of a knock against the US, but their numbers and general low cost means that the US often is able to stomach some amount of losses and still come out on top. On top of that, it's also important to note that the US will be receiving some additional new content in a future update. It has been confirmed that a new cavalry unit is going to be added and a new artillery piece is going to be added. So the US is going to be a bit larger in terms of its roster and play styles. So if that is out, try to factor those into your judgment, or keep that in mind if you go to buy it on sale, that there will be changes to the US that will make them stronger. Then we also have the Confederate States of America. Now, the Confederate States, as you will notice, have a lot of efficiency. Practically all of their infantry units have efficiency, which means that they play very similar to something like Prussia, who also has a lot of efficiency. Now, the Confederacy does have access to rifles, so they're able to attack from a greater distance, whereas the Prussians will struggle in that regard by only being limited to range. And overall, I would say that the Confederacy has a very well-rounded and capable infantry tab. It can rely on things like cheap volunteers, which are essentially the same as the US volunteers with only 3 cohesion, but they have efficiency on them. And then you also have a variety of what you could describe as more elite units, with the best ones being the Stonewall Brigade. The Stonewall Brigade recently got changed in the 1.3 update, and if you haven't seen that, there's a link in the description where you can go check out me covering the entire patch notes and generally giving my thoughts on it. But regardless, the Stonewall Brigade has access to range drill, efficiency, and melee drill, alongside having 4 cohesion and 6 health. They are expensive, but they pretty much have one of the strongest perk combinations in the entire game. We know, based on the other European nations, that range drill and efficiency is already very, very powerful. But also combine on the fact that Stonewalls are also good in melee, and they are extremely well-rounded and can often form the foundation for an aggressive Confederate player, being able to use efficiency to wrap and quickly get on top of the enemy, then using range drilled and its various melee perks in order to deal heavy damage. Like the US, however, one notable downside is that only their sharpshooters get access to rifled breech loaders, which is a pretty notable knock against them, which forces them to be limited in their firepower, having to make the tough decision between breech loading and rifled guns. However, the Whitworth sharpshooters do have the advantage of having efficiency, so these are able to essentially are able to move as they need to or stay in open formation, then switch to line and still move and fire off shots. They are order hungry, which is true for most of the Confederacy, but these guys are honestly very, very powerful. And they're also on the cheaper side. You're not going to find a range drill efficiency unit with rifled breech loaders for any cheaper than the Whitworth sharpshooters. The Confederate cavalry is also extremely powerful. They have access to not only some cheap infantry or cavalry, but they also have things like bushwhackers, which are relatively cheap cavalry that have the rugged trait, making them very difficult to catch. Then they also have Hampton's Brigade, which in general is probably the single strongest cavalry unit in the game, although its cost is also making it the most expensive. With access to shock, skirmishing, and efficiency, alongside a 6 health, 4 cohesion stat line, unlike something like Custer's Brigade, Hampton's has no downside to it, and you will be hard-pressed to find a light cavalry that outperforms Hampton's Brigade. Then you also have artillery, but the Confederacy artillery is pretty bare bones. It's definitely the weak point of the Confederacy in that their artillery is just, at best, borderline regular. very similar to something like, say, France, which, if you know anything, if you've played the game and play France, you should understand that their artillery pretty much is not useful outside of something like the Gatling gun because it can just absolutely shred an infantry. But the rest of their artillery is pretty underwhelming. The Confederacy has to rely on making use of that efficiency perk and strong cavalry in order to carry its games. The overall other thing that I would note is that the Confederacy can be a difficult nation to play because efficiency is something that takes a lot of time to make use of, even if you just have it on 1 or 2 units. But when your entire army is relying on making good use of efficiency, there is definitely a learning curve that you will have to watch out for in terms of really maximizing the impact. And that is one other downside to the Confederacy, is that they are very order hungry. They're able to trade blows better with the European nations on a more even playing field, but they're going to have to really be careful because if they really want to leverage the maximum amount of value out of their infantry, they're going to have to very carefully plan when they use that efficiency perk. Otherwise, they're essentially just wasting it. But those are the 2 factions you get access to, and like the USA, the Confederacy is also receiving a rework, receiving a couple new units, notably another cavalry unit and an artillery, and also receiving some changes to its current cavalry roster that will overall make it more powerful. So again, keep that in mind that these 2 nations are going to be receiving just a couple more tools in their kit in order to make them a little more interesting. Then the final thing I feel that the campaign adds is a variety of new maps. There are a variety of maps that are already in the game and more that will be added as time goes on. For example, Antietam is available as a map once you buy the DLC, and also I believe the Hickory Hill is also one in there. There's a variety of them, and I can't remember them off the top of my head, but it was said that there will be more. Williamsburg is also one that is available. But regardless, that is the DLC. It pretty much adds a bit of everything to the game. Not only do you get 2 factions, which in my personal opinion are actually very, very fun. In fact, I actually mained the United States of America. I would say this is the faction I have put the most amount of time into and is the one I am the most knowledgeable about. In fact, it was actually one of my first fire and maneuver videos. I made a guide over them. That guide is a bit outdated, is definitely outdated now, so I wouldn't go back and watch that video. But I feel that the US is a really fun faction due to its aggressive numbers nature that still works around the low cohesion. And the Confederacy is also very fun, being sort of a different take on Prussia, where it's not relying on its overpowered artillery alongside efficient infantry. It's instead putting more emphasis on its infantry and having very strong cavalry to win out. On top of that, if you, of course, enjoyed the campaigns, then you get double the amount you already have of 2 new ones, which is a lot of new campaign content. So if you've enjoyed the Crimean War at all, this can definitely be a very strong incentive. You pay about $4 for each of these if you're buying it on sale for about $10. Then you also get the new music tracks, new maps, and overall, I believe that the DLC is worth it. In fact, I would argue the DLC is even worth it not on sale at the regular $15. But for $10, I think it's a downright steal. Each faction, and if you count up each faction and are playing the campaigns, you're paying about $2.50 for each, which is not a bad deal, I think, in any way, especially because it's important to note that this is supporting an indie developer who put this game out free to play. So this is the only way they're really making money on this game. And if you're interested in supporting them, then this is a great way to do that while also making sure to get access to a bunch of new content. With that all said, that is the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed my review over the American Civil War DLC. I, again, really think that it's worthwhile, especially if it's on sale, which it is at the time this video is going up. But otherwise, thanks so much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. And let me know down in the comments below if you have bought the DLC or if I've convinced you to pick it up. I'm always interested to hear what you guys want to say. But that is all. I hope you have a good day.